Today's impactful guest is an amazing leader, Georgina Dukes-Harris, and she's the founder and CEO of Swishvo, which is a health tech company whose mission is to make sure that every baby is brought into this world safely, mother and baby, care for the family, and to help everyone try to live 100 years of a quality life. I can't think of a more beautiful mission. And if you know Georgina, you know it's very true to her authentic, caring self. And Swishvo's emphasis is on spiritual care. So we're going to hear a lot about that today. We can think about that as the third pillar that goes with the first two pillars of body care and mind care. And her focus is on whole health, creating an infrastructure where everyone can access whole health care, especially for underserved BIPOC communities. And it's a place where providers, payors, patients, healthcare systems can all join together in this sacred relationship of healing, to quote Georgina. So, Georgina, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you, Katie.
It's our honor and it's our pleasure. And I have so much I want to go through with you. So I'm very excited to jump right in. So, Georgina, what would you say is your moment of impact?
I think that my moment of impact has been taking this leap of faith and starting Swishvo for me. I think that the impact that I've been able to make and see just by betting on myself and saying, hey, there's this gap that I see in the community. How do I make sure, use all my experience and all the skills that I've learned over the year? How do I take that and make an impact that could transform lives? And I think that's what I feel like has been my biggest moment of impact, I would say.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about your journey leading up to founding Swishvo and the current launch just last week, relaunch of Swishvo 2.0, this
Yeah.
amazing health tech platform that there's nothing else like it. So, talk to me about your personal journey when you gave birth to your first child.
Yes. Okay. So Switchvo started out all because of a traumatic experience I had back in 2011. So in 2011, young, about to give birth to my first child, and it was a very traumatic experience. It ended up being an emergency C-section in the hospital.
Mm.
I was a college student, so I didn't have that much support. I wasn't as knowledgeable that you get the years of experience you get just from being out of undergrad. And I just didn't know what I didn't know. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I recovered and I went back to school and I was telling my professors, again, I was a public health major, about these things that I experienced, even just the postpartum experience. They were like, did you not know you should have had a lactation specialist? Why didn't you have a doula? And this is back in 2011. So think about today when people say, why didn't you have a doula? But why didn't you do acupuncture for that, or for that sciatic nerve issue, or a chiropractor? They just started telling me all these different providers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, I just thought you were supposed to see an OBGYN. That's all I did. I just followed the directions and went to my prenatal visits. And what I found was that there's this whole host of providers that exist outside of the four walls of the hospital that have been clinically proven to boost survival rates when it comes to maternal mortality, allow us to safely have vaginal births without C-section intervention, and yet, but they're not really like included into what we know think of as common healthcare experience. So in 2011, I wrote the business plan of what we know as Swishvo today. It was called Womb to Tomb then, not very cool name as Swishvo, but it was called Womb to Tomb. And the whole goal was to get moms exposed to these providers that are like the outliers outside the healthcare system. And so then fast forward to 2024, where I get a second chance at becoming a mom. And I knew this was going to be different this time because it was so traumatic the first time,
Mm-hmm.
that now I'm over the age of 30. I'm over the certain weight that you're supposed to be. And they're saying that, like, hey, you're considered a geriatric pregnancy, you're at risk, all these different things that really escalate your risk for maternal mortality. And I'm a Black woman in a high stress job. They layered that on top. So they're like, this is like, you're going to have to get a C-section again. We're going to have to stay on you, and gestational diabetes and all these things. And I said, I don't like, I'm going to do this different. And
Mm-hmm.
so we end up getting a home birth midwife. We got 3 doulas, a prenatal doula, a labor and delivery doula, a postpartum doula. We got a herbalist, a prenatal chiropractor, acupuncturist, and a nutritionist. And I wrap myself around in that, and a faith-based counselor. Wrap myself around that care. That care cost me almost $40,000 out of pocket. But when
Mm.
I tell you, that was the most beautiful and empowering birth I ever had. And it was a VBAC. I did not have to have any surgical intervention. She's the most spicy child in our life right now. Um, but it just was such an empowering experience. And to say that, why can't we have those experiences? Why does it have to be so traumatic when all I had to do was wrap myself with this kind of community or village of people that could help outside the OBGYN? It just was a powerful experience, and it confirmed. So Swishvo became full time at that point. I'm like, everyone has to get access to this care, but everyone is not going to have $40,000 to pay for it. How do we get this covered by insurance? So
Mm-hmm.
that's where you see Swishvo really honing in now, is how do we make sure these providers are getting paid adequately and everyone has access to them? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your personal journey, your lived experience, and yeah, I can barely even register what that felt like to be so young with your first birth, and to have it be so traumatic, and to feel alone.
Hmm.
It's really hard. I know myself. I have 3 grown sons, and I am steeped in white privilege, and yet I found the childbirth experience to be really scary. You spend all these months, you think you're on top of it, and then when you get wheeled into like an OR room, you're like, what, what's going on? It feels like you're on an alien planet. And it sounds like you really had a very traumatic, scary medical experience with your first, where you required certain care. And with mine, it was more, it happened to my firstborn son.
Hmm.
He had the cord wrapped around him, and he swallowed a bunch of stuff. And if they hadn't, his initial APGAR score was like 2. And if they hadn't aspirated him, like, so it was really scary because there was no crying. You know,
Hmm.
you're as a mom, you're like, what's going on down there? I
Yeah.
just want to hear some
Mhm.
crying like in the movies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's such, the birth journey is such a majestic spiritual experience, but it's also so fragile. You feel so vulnerable. And I felt that way even with all the privileges I enjoyed. I had insurance and all the things. So I'm so glad that your second experience, you really figured out how to wrap yourself in all that care. And that's
Hmm.
so inspiring. And you really lived the origin story of Swishvo, right? You're like, this is what we need. Look at the joyful outcome. I feel safe, the baby's safe, the family's together. we spent $40,000.
Yes, yes.
So that part's not sustainable. So, like, how do we create a health tech solution leveraging your 15 years of experience in innovation technology in various settings, in various contexts to birth Swishvo? So, I really appreciate you sharing that story. So, can I just move us to Black maternal death for a minute?
Mm,
Because I want to make sure that everyone's really aware of these statistics. I think it's really important to just spend a second on it. So these statistics are from the CDC. For white women in 2023, it was 14.5 deaths, so basically 14. And at the same time, for Black women, it was 50. 50. So we're talking triple the risk.
mhm.
And then experts say that 80 to 87% of pregnancy related deaths for Black women are preventable. And this is throughout Georgina's narrative. When you hear her speak, when you hear her pitch, when you look at her website, she has all of these facts laid out for you. And I wanted to share them. And the other thing that I really wasn't aware of until I was trying to do a little homework before speaking to you, but now it makes sense that almost 60% of pregnancy related deaths happen between 1 week and 1 year after delivery.
After.
Yeah,
After.
after. And everybody thinks, okay, done and dusted. We sent you
Yep.
home with this fun striped blanket with this beautiful baby, and off you go, and everything's going to be fine. And actually, that's when the risks really spike. So, can you talk to us a little bit about this? Because you've talked to so many providers in
Yes.
creating Swishvo. You've done extensive research.
Yes, so we talked to over 1,100 providers just to get Swishvo off the ground,
Wow.
but I think it's what is so powerful because it was a common thread from all of those interviews, what you are saying about what happens after. So over 50%, like you stated, of the deaths happen after the baby. So for us to say, like as a community, oh, she made it to the finish line. Let's look at this cute little baby, and we're not thinking about what is the mom's experience right now. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where we are really missing this missing piece. I think Melinda Gates, she just put this huge fund around women's health, and she was asked in an interview, she was like, what is the one thing that you would just throw all your money at? Like, if you could see a solution around that, that it could really help. And she said, I just want the cure for postpartum depression. Like that was what she said. She would spend all her money postpartum depression, right? Like we are not, and is it really postpartum depression? We don't really know, but whatever happens from that moment that woman births that child, what becomes of her and her identity and her meaning, and what does this new journey means if she's a first time mom, second time mom? We are completely losing that, and we are literally discharging people from the hospital when their body is still in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And when we discharge them and they don't have that village similar to what I built to go home to that is checking in on them, this is where people fall through the cracks and where death can rise so quickly. Even in just my experience, and I'll just speak for myself. When I had my second child, my midwife texted me every single day. She told me to check my blood pressure in the morning, in the afternoon, every single day. My blood pressure actually started to rise. She immediately got me a postpartum hypertension medication sent. My doula checked on me. My postpartum doula checked on me like 3 or 4 times a week and came and did night visits to help. And she was like, hey, your feet are still swollen. Like, try this, giving me different regimens to try. That is because we know once a mom is discharged from the hospital after having a baby, she doesn't really see her OBGYN until 6 weeks, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you are out on your own for those 6 weeks. And we need that village to do that wraparound care postpartum. And it doesn't have to be a doctor. A doctor is like operating at the top of their license and moving on. There are providers who actually love this work, who are passionate about this work, that want to swoop in. but there's no payment infrastructure for them. So a lot of moms are paying out of pocket for night visits, night nurses, and people are turning their nose up at them. Meanwhile, they are literally saving their lives, as you can see from the statistics, that there's a higher chance of them dying if they don't have that support for them to sleep all the way through the night, for them to rest their hormonal system so that they can be able to tap into this motherhood journey. So those are my thoughts on it. That's from lived experience as well as the data, and from actual interviews from providers saying they wish they had they had more respect for the postpartum, the fourth trimester, as they call it, as well.
Thank you for sharing that and for citing very specific types of care you had to make sure you didn't get hypertensive and to control swelling and so on. Because I originally understood that those doulas and herbalists and people were helping you in the birth experience, but really it's before and after, because of these risks are so critical. The medical risks like bleeding, incision. There's a lot of high blood pressure, infection, cardiomyopathy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I really appreciate you saying that. I know I really, with all three children, really struggled with breastfeeding. Like we all want to do it. We all believe in the benefit of it. We see it as a natural connection. Um, but sometimes it's hard. And
Yes.
that calling that lactation consultant and having them come to the house and
Mm-hmm.
talk about, latching on and tricks of the trade. I mean, that was like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory ticket for me. I was like, this is so valuable.
Yes.
And when you're in that situation, you're so desperate, you'll put yourself in debt to get any kind of help. And that's the problem. One of the problems that Georgina and Swishvo are going to fix.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think is important to say is that education, income, and professional experience are not protective for Black women. A college educated Black woman is more likely to die from pregnancy related causes than a white woman without a high school diploma. And that's because we have systemic racism, we have implicit bias, we have care inequities, we have maternal care deserts, we have weathering and a history of internalized stress from this structural racism. And, we have some high profile near miss experiences. You yourself maybe characterizing yours as, it was super traumatic. It was maybe, I don't want to overstate it, but I think it was maybe a near miss for you, right? Your first birth.
Yep.
And, Serena Williams had a known history of blood clots, and she suffered a pulmonary embolism. Allison Felix,
Mm-hmm.
she had severe preeclampsia. And then a lot of people are really grieving Dr. Janelle Green Smith.
Yep. Dr. Smith. Yep.
Yeah, who the world lost on January 1st from complications. And she was, help me out here, she was a leading advocate of
And
maternal
midwives.
health.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a doctorate in nursing,
Mm-hmm.
and the system didn't save her.
Yes. And I think that's we can't forget her name. Like, I've been in so many sessions over the past few weeks about Dr. Green Smith and just all the great work she was doing to advocate. I didn't get the chance to meet her, but I think it speaks volumes to what women of color are experiencing when they have to actually bring a child into this world. And I think that the main thing that I'm hearing, at least from the providers and from some of the moms that we've interviewed, is that they are not listened to. if they come back to the hospital and say, hey, I just been feeling weird, I can't even describe it, right? I've been feeling weird. The hospital say, oh, you're just stressed, you just had a baby, you're not sleeping, go back home and sleep. And that's when you lose them, right? Like, all I can tell you is I just don't feel right, but we're dismissing it instead of doing the right, like having the right people around her that can actually advocate and say, no, she doesn't look right. I've seen her when when she's good, and I've seen her when she's wrong. And a lot of women don't have that, and we're and it's like, why do we need that? Why can't you just listen and believe me the first time when I say I don't
Right.
feel well? um and and why do I have to write a dissertation for that? So all that to say, I think what you're bringing up are powerful examples. Like, these are celebrities, these are educated women, top of their game, and they're experiencing this, but they were saved because people believed them. Like, I believe I saw Serena Williams interview, and she was like, her husband was there advocating for her, like she had a team, a village around her, advocating, making sure that she got the care she needs. And not everyone has that luxury, which is why do they need that luxury? Why can't people just believe them the first time?
Right. Um, you know, not listening, not witnessing. I mean, that's a form of racism and bias.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, it's the little things that we say that are the clues for the medical professionals to know something's off, right? The little
Mm-hmm.
things that we describe. This is not how I normally am, right? It shouldn't have to be we're diagnosing ourselves and then presenting it to them. So, yeah, this is really important. And I'm so deeply honored to have Georgina and her beautiful presence, all of her wisdom, her generosity in sharing her experience, her mad business chops, her technology chutzpah here, because talk about an impact. This is preventable. We're hearing this is preventable. And she's lived the solution to wrap yourself in these systems and to make these systems the third pillar of reimbursed, integrated, whole health care models. So let's go to talking about the impact you care about and the action from that impact. So I've heard you talk a lot. Maybe a decade ago, you were talking to me and educating me about social determinants of health. And you really brought it into my awareness, and I'm very grateful for that. And now your action, and you worked right at Unite Us. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk a little bit about your journey with uh, the importance of social determinants of health, and maybe explain it to people that are not familiar with it.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up social determinants of health. That was my first baby passion.
Yeah.
I think the easiest way I could explain social determinants of health for those of you who are unaware, it's the factors that impact us where we sleep, play, and pray, right? So these are things outside of the clinical realm. So this could be your access to housing, affordable housing, your access to gainful employment, not just employment, but are you gainfully employed where you can breathe a little and afford your lifestyle? Your access to food, and not only food, nutrition, like the fact that you can get access to food. Maybe you can get a can of beans or some chips, but is it nutritious for you, right? So your access to food and nutritious food, your access to transportation, all of those are considered social determinants of health. They are things that can determine your health, but there are social aspects that address your social health. And I studied this as an undergrad student at Clemson in public health. And then I went on to build my healthcare career around going to academic medical centers and doing work around social determinants of health. And because of that work I did at those academic medical centers, I ended up at an early stage startup. They were in the seed stage when I joined. I was one of their first healthcare employees as an employee in North Carolina, and we were in charge of addressing social determinants of health for the entire state of North Carolina. At the time, North Carolina had received a Medicaid 1115 waiver, which is $650 million. This was through CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. They were basically telling states, whatever we're doing with Medicaid ain't working right now. We're going to give you money if you can do something innovative to show us how can we better people's health in a different way with Medicaid. And North Carolina said, how about you give us that money, and we, instead of pushing all this money into healthcare, which is only 20% of someone's, can only explain 20% of someone's condition, let's push it into social determinants of health, which impacts 80% of someone's condition. And so they started reimbursing for Medicaid recipients who needed housing. They would use this money to pay for housing, to pay for a support for employment, to pay for access to food or food pantry boxes. So it was the most exciting work to be a part of building social determinants of health, especially during COVID. That was like the height of it, because COVID exacerbated these conditions. We all knew that there were people who were living in poverty. We all knew that there were people who were barely making it, but COVID just shined the light. Everybody was home. And so all of this funding, all of these opportunities came in where we were just helping so many people get just back and forth to dialysis or back and forth to their job so that they could provide for their family. And it was just the most beautiful experience. But I will say, what I learned at Unite Us with like addressing social determinants of health and the powerful experience, and it really helped me shape Swishvo, because I told you I wrote my business plan for Swishvo before I even went to Unite Us. That was in 2011. But what Unite Us showed me is that people need access, right, to these services. And how do you make it so that people are not having to pay? Like, how do you make it so insurance can help pay for some of these services because they impact health? And I think I took that same mindset with me when I started building Swishvo, because it is like we're trying to give people access to something that they traditionally haven't had, just like social determinants of health. And I'm thinking about, in a way, how do I make sure insurance can support this, though? Like, these services have been clinically proven. How do I do the same exact model that brings equity to people, but in a different way? I hope that makes sense. But I just want you to follow my thoughts of how, like, I felt like Unitas was a great foundation for me to launch Swishvo off of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I first met you when you were at a tertiary academic medical center, Duke Health, and you were
Yes.
advising them. And then you went and you were in the cutting edge of the work in social determinants of health, right? And it's it's all the things that your doctor tells you to do, right? Like you know, try to get yourself to a situation where you don't have so much stress. You can count on your job, and then you can walk away from your job and have a peaceful evening. You can afford nutritious food. You have access to nutritious food. You're not stuck in a food desert where you have to like take 3 buses to go get nutritious food. And that you have access to care, that there's culturally informed care around you. And so we probably could do the whole episode on that, but there's
Yes.
so much I want to get to about Swishfo. But I do see the through line of your lived experience, and then how do I create this platform, and then really understanding the social determinants, and it all leads to what does integrated care look like right now? What's missing? And so
Mm-hmm.
Georgina put her finger on the pulse, and she figured out what's missing is spiritual care. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm so glad the way you said it just makes it sound like it was such a beautiful experience. But I will say it was so much torment in my mind going through this, because one, I even, like, I wish I had brought the business plan. I still have a copy of the business plan I wrote in 2011, and I had spiritual health underlined, and again, and I remember showing it to professors. They was like, people are not going to go for that, you
Mm,
know? And so things like that have been in my head, because it's something that I know I have intrinsically known that this is a gap, but I need more data. I need to understand the research and pieces of that.
yeah.
So going back to spiritual health, I actually, the first time that it had came back up since starting to build Swishvo was actually interviewing those 1,100 providers. So I was a part of an accelerator, and we had to do customer discovery and go out and interview actual potential customers and say, would you like this idea? It was just drawn up on a piece of paper, or I just talk ideas out to them. And a lot of them were saying, like, basically, do you do work for the body? Do you do work like as a doula? Are you actually operating as a doctor or midwife? And doulas were saying, no, like, I mean, I can work out with the mom, but I'm not like in the body. And they were, so we asked, like, what actually do you do to help the mom's mind? Like, if you're a postpartum doula with depression, and they were like, no, I mean, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a licensed therapist, right? Like, so what exactly am I doing with the mind? And it was we were in a doula group, and they said, what we do is more spiritual. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a spirit. Like, we are setting your spirit up for birth in the prenatal process. During labor and delivery, we're really grounding your spirit through all those pain and
Yeah.
contractions, right? Like, you definitely have to be centered.
Yes.
And then postpartum, you're helping them find meaning and belonging and understand what does this new path as a mother looks like. And I would say, like, just hearing them talk about it in that way, and it just clicked, and I just started talking about what Swishville does is, like, we want to empower spiritual health. And immediately, so many of these providers started flocking because they felt like this is them, right? Like,
Yep.
you can call it alternative, you can call it complementary, although they don't like those terms, but maybe more people will understand alternative, complementary, or integrative. What they really believe that they offer is spiritual health. And I think that one of the most powerful examples I can give you too, just to go along with this, is in October. October is Pregnancy Loss and Infant Loss Awareness Month. We had a session in Charlotte where we were just talking to people and providers who support this work, because we were just learning about the type of providers we want to serve. And there's this whole group called Death Doulas. And so they work with elder care. You know, you only think doula, you think only working with moms and birth, but death doulas work with elderly and helping them transition from hospice to death, and like making sure it's a peaceful experience. So all that to say, we just brought all these providers together, and we brought some parents together who had experienced this loss, whether it was a husband who experienced the loss of his wife due to maternal
Mm.
mortality. It was parents who experienced the loss of an infant, and it was women who experienced miscarriages. And it was just so powerful hearing the gaps, though. It's like, who is there for them when they have a miscarriage? What does that look like, right? Who is the maternal provider that's there for the mom when the baby passes at 5 weeks? That was one of the experiences of one of the moms or the families. And I mean, the father broke down in tears, like, he's like, I just wish there was something different I could do. There was no one there for us. Like, we didn't know what, we just went home and was told to just go back to work and go back like nothing happened. And I think even that, those examples right there show you that there is something fundamentally missing in our healthcare system, especially when it comes to spiritual care, because there's so many statistics and peer-reviewed studies about how we need bereavement support services, grief support services, to do this wraparound care. And these are not, grief and bereavement are not mental health services. They are not body health services or physical health services. These are purely spiritual health services to make people understand their meaning and belonging in life. And I think that session in October just really took us, gave us the next level and courage to start talking about this broadly, to actually start talking to hospitals and health plans, and really grow Swishvo to what you see it as, like with the relaunch and everything, because we felt like we finally found what our true purpose is and what our true niche to get into the market is around this spiritual health infrastructure, and helping these people understand like what that spiritual health process looks like. And I will say too, it just has continued to evolve. Even just earlier today, we was talking to a mom was talking to a grief doula, and she was just crying because she was like, she feels like a part of her died at the birth. Now she loves looking at this baby, but she's grieving who she was and the body she had. And she just, mental health there, she's going to therapy every week. She's going to see her doctor. Her midwife is there for her, but she needed to talk to a grief doula because there's something spiritual that was missing. So I'm sorry that was so long-winded, but when you talk about spiritual health, like this is where I really feel like this is missing, because we keep saying whole health in healthcare, and we all know it's mind, body, spirit, but we only fund the first two. Well, basically one, and the two is just now getting their mind. But how can we forget the spirit and continue to call it woo woo, or that's like not trusted medicine, you know?
Yeah. So I want to respond to a couple of things in what you said, because that was so wise, so profound, and super actionable. So, you came up with the idea, the business plan, as a brand new young mother studying your public health degree, and you never lost the vision, and you had underlined there spiritual care. And then when you were moving forth after having your second birth and seeing how the benefit of the wraparound care, and you want this for everyone, but we have to solve the problems for providers,
Mm-hmm.
women in crisis, and connect to healthcare systems and get reimbursement and everything. And then you went into the accelerator, and in the accelerator, they wanted these first person deep dives. And it's like the unlock, the affirmation of what you already knew. You already knew it in your body. You knew it in your lived experience. You came up with the idea. You showed it to your professors in 2014 or whatever the year was, right? You knew it. But now you saw like the affirmation from the market,
Yeah.
which is so crucial for founders
Mm-hmm.
to see. And that's when you knew and then you had this like floodgate of all of these holistic healers who had been marginalized as woo woo, alternative, who were doing these crucial work, helping people figure out how to survive these major life transitions, where even if they're lucky to have friends and family around them, a lot of times friends and family just don't know how to hold the space for loss, for grief.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they don't want to, it's that maybe they don't know how to. And then they don't know how to show up. And the person is just sitting there in this total vacuum of isolation. So I think it's so great. I think I wrote down some of these Georgina quotes. She saw the design flaw in the current health system.
Mm-hmm.
The design flaw, only sort of one fully, not even fully, right? The country doesn't have universal health insurance, but that's
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 true.
for season 2. We'll talk about that in season 2, Georgina, when you bring back your original business plan. But yeah, so 1 is sort of funded, 2 is a little bit funded, and 3, spiritual, is not funded at all. But we're
Mm-hmm.
spiritual beings, we're emotional beings, right? And when our spirit is suffering, when our emotions are suffering, and we can't find a way to connect and express and hold the space, we cannot thrive. We cannot care for others. We're not fully ourselves. So
Yep.
this work is, it's spiritual, it's sacred, it's also super practical,
Yes.
because it enables people to recover and move forward in their lives, which is the most important thing. But also for payers, the healthcare systems, they're designed. They don't want to keep treating people in crisis and trauma. They want people to figure out how to thrive, right? So it's a giant win, win, win.
Yes. You can see it the way I see it. Like, I think it's a win-win-win, just from a business perspective, but also just from a healthy community perspective. Like, when people are spiritually grounded, and you don't even have to think of it as religion or
Right.
faith, like going to a service every Sunday, but you are confident in who you are as a human being. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have, and this is something I'm learning. I don't know, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm in school right now. I'm at Emory University, in an MDiv program with hopes to get my PhD one day. While I'm building this business, I'm a little bit chaotic in the course of my goals, but And one thing I've learned about being in seminary school is that like it when you say spirit, like it is a sense of meaning and belonging. And there's this whole thing about spiritual direction that everyone like they say everyone should have a spiritual director or guide, right? That is has nothing to do with pastoring, preaching, but someone that helps you understand what your true meaning is, what your true belonging in, and as you go through life's journey, like they're there to help guide you through that. And so all that to say, like I fundamentally believe that this spirit piece, like we have to get that whole, because once someone has that, then why would they want to do anything unhealthy? Like,
Right.
why would you want to smoke while you're pregnant? Why would you like think about consuming this alcohol if you know it's going to hurt your hurt your child? Like I'm just talking about from a maternal health perspective, right?
Right.
Because you are centered, you know what your purpose is. So it just it's I feel like it's common sense, but we just don't want to even think about it that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I think, I love that you brought in, Swishvo is really looking at the entirety of spiritual care, right? Herbalists, chaplains,
Mhm.
pelvic floor people, and you mentioned death doulas. And I was going to say, like, my when my mother passed away, she was in hospice, and we had a
Mhm.
chaplain come, and it was so valuable just to talk to the immediate family, my siblings, my father. My mother was not really in a position to communicate, but to help us make meaning,
Yes.
get grounded, get centered,
Mhm.
understand what were we really feeling, really get us to reflect and get us to understand how was the rest of the family experiencing it. Oh wow, I'm looking at it so differently. I didn't realize how you're looking at it.
Yes.
Right? And it just created this space where when she did pass, we had had that gift of the stimulus for the reflection, for the
Mhm.
communion, not the religious communion, but the sense of like, here we are as a family in communion
Mhm.
about our mother who's means so much to us, right? And so that's just my own personal example, right?
It's a
And
powerful example.
yeah, and another thing was that my mother really was able to enjoy was the hospice enabled beautiful performer, musical performer, and she just sang, and you could see that my mother was experiencing it, and it just brought so much peace.
A music therapist. I love that. That I just got
Yeah,
my first one to sign back up on the relaunch, and just you bringing up music therapy, especially with longevity and aging, like with your mother. And I'm like, when you see that in action, like how it brings them back, right? Or
yeah, yeah.
how they get that light in their eyes. It again, that's something spiritual. Like you touched my mother in that moment where she felt like herself again. It was like a sense of being again, and
Mm.
I got chills when you brought up that the music therapy thing
Uh,
too.
all right. Um, so let's unpack the myth of woo woo for a second. So I'm quoting Georgina in all of this. So, you know, Swishvo is it's helping people in crisis, women in crisis. It's also helping providers whose work has been marginalized, finding pathways to credentialing, documenting outcomes, getting paid, you know, users of the service being able to get reimbursed, and healthcare systems understanding that this reduces utilization and creates better outcomes and all of the things, right? And this quote I love from you, Georgina: we're building this with you, not just for you. And then Georgina shared one of the many testimonials that are flooding in. Um, a person said, I've been doing this work for 8 years. I've never had a system. that actually understands what I do. So talk a little bit about when you work with providers, what does it feel like for them to come out of this like myth of woo-woo and this sense of being invisible?
I think it feels for me, the word that they use a lot is seen,
Mm,
right? And that's such a simple word, but no one really sees these providers that exist on the outskirts, especially in healthcare. So to me, I feel so empowered to help these providers feel seen. And it's like, I think I'm just an advocate in general, but it's like I'm advocating, I'm fighting for something. And really, my origin story is I just wanted moms to have access to these providers.
mm-hmm.
But in turn, in order for moms to have access to these providers need to be taken care of. I always say this is like the Uber theory, right? Like, it was like, do you get the drivers first or the riders first? And when I went on and interviewed the drivers, they was like, we don't have cars, we don't have licenses, I'm missing a tire. Like, they don't have the tools they need to support these moms to like build legit businesses. I can't tell you how many like lactation specialists and doulas and herbalists I spoke to who are doing this on the side. They know that they're called to do this work. They want to do it full time, but because it's not seen as a respectable profession, they're working full time at Amazon and then just leaving or calling in sick when a mom has a birth. Like, think about that. We have these professionals who literally save lives. There's all these statistics, like you said, 80% preventable. There's over 81% survival rate if you have a doula at your birth. And we are literally telling these people, your work doesn't matter. You still need to clock in at Amazon and just do 1 or 2 moms a month on the side, you know? And I just think when I talk to these providers, it's making me realize, it just makes me kind of have a chip on my shoulder and like, I have to get this right because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to let them down. I want them to be able to do this full time and really help as many mothers as possible, and that's what is going to happen. So every feature you would see built in the technology today has been provider led, provider focused. Even earlier today, we had a provider give feedback to say, hey, I think you should separate music therapists and art therapists. We had those grouped together in the platform, like they're completely different. Let me explain why. This is the type of notes I need to see on my screen, and this is the type of notes the art therapist needs to see. And guess what? We did it right then. We made that change, but that just shows you like we are building this with them. If you tell us something doesn't work quite right, we will fix that because this needs to work for you so that we can open up access so these moms can come in. And I'm ready for that part too.
I love it. I mean, it is so user-centered design, and you have an incredible business background. I mean, just a few stats. 15 years in healthcare, product management, digital health, value-based care. She's scaled products from seed to 2 billion. She's launched AI-powered platforms. She's built go-to-market strategies that drove $100 million in annual recurring revenue. She's worked in provider systems, payer systems, startups, and the through line has always been improving patient outcomes, reducing cost, which makes it sustainable, and empowering providers. So I want to just say one little footnote about the infrastructure that you built, and then I want to go to your founder journey real quick because I wish we had more time, but I want to make sure we get this out. So Georgina says we're making spiritual health visible, measurable, culturally grounded, and ready for the future of whole healthcare delivery. And she's creating infrastructure, which is not just like a marketplace. It's a pathway for these healers to then become part of the capital structure, the payment flows, be truly integrated in all ways. And so, for example, the software helps them track outcomes, patient satisfaction family satisfaction, number of visits. I was hanging out on the platform. It's beautiful design, really spacious. You actually feel really grounded on it, so it has really nice sensory elements. A path toward credentialing and reimbursement, and visibility to the families who need you. So, in this way, she's taking what is sacred work and putting it through all the workflows we need so that the money circulates and it's affordable, sustainable for everyone. So, so important. You are one of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met. So, I am a strategic advisor to founders, and I follow Georgina on LinkedIn, and I'd be like, okay, Georgina won this pitch conference, and then like 2 weeks max would go by, and like there's Georgina on stage. Georgina won this pitch conference, like people. She could be teaching the accelerators. Okay. So, any of you investors out there, spiritual care, it's the next leg of value based care. Get in there with your checkbooks. But can you talk to us a little bit about your experience as an entrepreneur, raising money, doing pitches? Because you are so insanely successful in this realm. That I want folks to have a chance to hear from you about it.
Oh, thank you. That's hilarious that you said. I really did pitch competitions. And maybe one day I should teach about pitch competitions because I really
Yes.
enjoy them. But
Yes.
I'll start with that in general. So pitch competition, just because you brought it up, and I try to tell other founders this. For me, one, I understand the fight we're up against as women. Just speaking to the women, I know men are probably listening to this too, but only 2% of VC funding goes to women. 2%. And even smaller than that goes to moms. Like that's even smaller. These are more young women straight out of college who can just stay up all night and do the VC, do the startup stuff. And I'm like, I gotta put these kids to bed. Like, so it's even smaller than that is moms, and then let alone black, so all that to say is like I knew that I had statistics stacked against me,
Right.
and I believed in this, and I knew that it was a great idea. Like it made sense. The market is there, the TAM, SOM, and SAM are there. Like, how do I get revenue or get funding in so that I could start building it out, because I'm working, but there's no funding here to even build out a software. So my very first, when I had the idea, I started looking at LinkedIn, just seeing different funding. So I started applying for grants and different things like that. And then one of the things I signed up for was called Mogul Millennial, or right now it's been renamed the Capital Club. And they send you grants, but mixed in with those grants, they'll send you pitch competitions. And every day you get an email with them with different grants and things you can apply for. And I saw a pitch competition that was in Austin, Texas. And I'm like, I'm gonna go. It was from Black Girl Ventures and was sponsored by the NBA Foundation and Kroger Foundation. And I was like, I am gonna go and do this. I need people to know about this. And literally, me and my mom flew there because my mom didn't trust it. She was like, why are you going to Texas to talk about this? Like, why are you doing that? But she stood in line with me. We were like the first 10 people in line because you had to wait outside the building. It was like almost over 100 people there to pitch. And so you had to go through 2 rounds. You got 1 minute to pitch in front of these 3 judges. And if they wanted you to come back to the next round, then you had 3 minutes to pitch. And when I say I practice. I literally would post on Instagram, will anyone listen to me pitch? And I would just call them on Instagram or Facebook and pitch to them, and then they'll give me feedback. I just practice. And I won $20,000. I won first place, $20,000, and that was enough for me to build out the wireframe and start the build of Swishvo. So all that to say, I was like, whoa, this is non-dilutive funding. I don't have to give away any equity in the company because I'm just starting out. I don't even know what people would take equity of, and I need to actually have a software. So I just started applying for nothing but pitch competitions, and probably at the end of 2025, I probably got around $160,000 that I
Wow.
had got to fund Swishvo through pitch competitions. That's what I did. So I strongly encourage it because that's a part of my founder journey. I do think VC is great for those who want to scale quickly and who want to get there. Like VC businesses are brilliant businesses of the future. But I wanted to make sure before I even walked down that lane that I had proof that I knew I wasn't going to waste people's money. I think that's the main thing for me that I think is different between non-dilutive and dilutive funding. Non-dilutive is grants. I can get the money. I can try things out. When you get in the bed with VC, these are people's life savings. Like they're LPs are people like us who just wanted to give 5,000, well, some of the angel investment groups, and it's like, are you really going to waste someone's money on an idea that you haven't been able to test or build out or make sure that it could work and get them great returns? I don't feel comfortable doing that. So that's why I'm like, let me try this with free money. And once I can show it works, then I'll go talk to you, VC, and say, like, hey, I promise you I can get you your people 1,000 times X over from this idea. But that has been my founder journey around funding. I would say other than funding, the founder journey has been a bit of ebbs and flows, and I would be interested in yours because I've been following you and all the great things you've done in your journey. But I would say for me, wow, when we first met, you kind of inspired me, and that group inspired me to do things like just start doing things on the side so that I could get this business acumen and understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So after we met, remember I started a blog, a
Mm-hmm.
motherhood blog, just figuring out what does that look like when you're building a website and you're trying to get market to people. Then I started selling t-shirts on that blog. So what does it look like when you actually have a product that people want to buy? Then I got into figuring out trucking. Like, what does it look like to actually offer a service to people? And just every business I did on the side, it helped me understand something different that I would need eventually for Swishvo. And so when it got time for me to start Swishvo, I actually was working in a really very well paying role, but I had to quit. I was making over $250,000 a year,
Wow.
and which is great, like and especially in these times. But I had to quit because they said I couldn't work on any side projects and work there at the same time,
Mm.
and that really challenged me. Right? It's like this is our livelihood, for our household, and but also this is my dream. Which one do I take? And I feel like if I was in my right mind, I would have stayed. But I wasn't in my right mind. I took the bet. And honestly, I don't regret it. It hasn't been easy. It's been really hard. But every business, every contract we have, like every mom that safely has a birth, that says it's worth it for me. And my kids are still okay. We still have a roof over our head, so that's what matters. So yeah. So all that to
Wow.
say, that's been my founder journey, and I know that was like a woo-woo way to get there, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, that was so informative. It also was so you. It just demonstrates your commitment that at a soul level, you are an advocate. You're even an advocate, a steward of other people's money that invest in your business. You take to heart a responsibility. It just shows what an aligned founder you are. And you walked away from a $250,000 job. There's a cute video on your, not cute, there's a great video on your website talking about people calling you insane, that you prioritize this calling and you were willing to make the sacrifices that come with being a founder, and you are all in. And I have to thank you as, a human here who values spirit and values thriving and whole health. Thank goodness that you did take the bet, and we thank you. And it's it's a it's a brilliant vision, but it's more than that because the app exists right here on your phone. It's
Yeah.
a real thing. It's a perfect technology. It's proven out. I couldn't find the piece of paper in front of me at the right time where I wrote down, she won second place at Fearless Fund. She's a Google Community AI Fellow. She's got Rock Health Innovation Fellowship. Like the list goes on, and on. So I want to run through one thing and then I want to ask you the last question because we're going to have to close. So
Okay.
if anyone out there is still, wondering if spiritual health is visible, measurable, and makes a difference, here's some statistics. 1,500 peer-reviewed studies link spiritual health to better medical outcomes. 80% of Americans rely on spiritual coping during crisis. That's from Pew Research. Spiritual care reduces ICU length of stay by 2.3 days, which anyone who's ever gotten a hospital bill, that's thousands right there.
Hmm.
Post-pandemic demand for non-traditional healing is up 40%. And I got statistics here from JAMA, the Harvard School of Public Health, Journal of Palliative Medicine. Don't have time to go through them all. But we have proven that this value proposition of embracing the whole healthcare model, and CMS is primed for it right now too. And it is time for exactly what Georgina and Swishvo are offering. All right, so we have to close. Regrettably, I've got lots of things I still want to talk about. So season 2. So what brings you hope, Georgina? We always close on what brings you hope.
I would say what brings me the most hope right now are the advocates. So the people like you, the people that I'm seeing on LinkedIn who are not giving up and who are talking about this, who are talking about Dr. Greensmith, who are continuing to share like the different innovations that are coming from CMS and continuing to share what I post for providers to expand the network. When I see advocates who are strong, activists, not giving up on this movement and this moment and not seeing it as just a phase or a fad, that gives me hope because that shows me that like as long as these people are fighting for this, there is a chance that we can have every baby born safe and every life reach 100 quality years. But without these people helping advocate for these initiatives, it's not going to happen. So all that to say, every time I see someone using their words, whether it's through sharing on social media or talking about it, that just shows me the power of like what we're going to do that's going to transform the lives of our community. So that gives me hope.
Beautiful. I can feel that hope. I can feel it. I want to thank you so much. You are such a force field of energy. You have such a creative, visionary mind where you can see something that's needed and really have a full vision and then work backwards to what are all the steps that need to
Mhm.
be done? Who are all the partners who need to come in? How do we put together this beautiful mosaic, which is Swishvo? So thank you for the work that you are doing. Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for your innovation. Thank you for uplifting BIPOC families, communities, and all families and communities. And it has been my honor to chat with you today, Georgina Dukes-Harris.
Thank you so much, Kay. I appreciate the opportunity and thank you for giving people like me a platform just to share the great work that we're doing.
Absolutely, my honor.